Hello, I am Delta Dynamite, and I'm here today to talk about the Far Cry 3 map editor. The reason I'm doing this is because I suspect that most people like me who want Far Cry 3 will have bought it by now. So, either when it came out or over the Christmas sale, you'll probably have bought Far Cry 3. You'll have probably played all the way through the single player and thought, yeah, that was pretty good. Well, really good actually. I really enjoyed the single player. You might have tried out the co-op and thought, it's a little bit linear. For me, it's very linear. I didn't really enjoy the co-op that much. And then you might have gone online and gone, yeah, this is cool, but not quite as good as some of the other online experiences that are already available. So then you might have thought, okay, well, that's it. I'm going to put down Far Cry 3 now and go on to something else, perhaps. And lots of people didn't seem to try out the map editor, which is quite a sad thing because the map editor is really good, in my opinion. So I'm going to talk about what's good about the map editor, what's a little bit rubbish about the map editor, and then what's being done to fix the map editor by the modding community, and specifically by one guy in the modding community who was actually quite a big modder on Far Cry 2 as well, and did a lot of work on Far Cry 2. So that's a bit interesting. So first up, I'm just going to talk about the good points. The best thing by far is the terrain editing that's available. You can do lots and lots of things with terrain editing. Terrain bump is probably the most simple. You just make a bump. Bump, 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 bump. But the best thing about all of the terrain tools, and this applies to all of them, as well as to the texturing and to some other tools as well, is the options for your brush. So I can have a circular brush like I have here. I can change it to a square brush. If I pop it back to a circular brush, you can change the radius quite easily to make it cover a very large area. You can change the hardness. Changing the hardness changes the yellow circle in the inside, and basically it means that bit will be the strongest. So if I make it really big, the whole thing will just lift up like a square. If I make it really small, then it'll round off the edges, as you can see. Now that's very good. Distortion is, well, I'll show you distortion, you can see what it is. It kind of makes it a bit more random, like you get little bumps here and there, like you can see here. There's a little one right here and a big one here. So that's what distortion does, and speed is the speed at which it increases in height. So speed, really fast, really, well, that's nothing, so really slow. So you can change, so you can get that little bit more control over what you're doing when you're using the tools. And these tools, these changing in the tools is available for every single different terrain option, and quite a few other options like the texturing options and things like that. So I'll just talk through the different sorts of terrain editing. Raise lower is what you'd expect. You can raise it to a certain height, or you can lower it to a certain height. So if I put it at -20, it'll just make a big hole, and so we've got a big hole there. And if I put it to, say, well, let's do the opposite, it's about 30, but it makes a big peak like that. So that's helpful if you want things to all be at an exact same height. So if I wanted like a really big area of the map that was all level 30, I could just do that. It would bump it up. Of course it stacks, so that's 30 above this now. If I did this again, same thing, that goes up with it. So that's what the terrain raise lower does. Terrain flatten just makes the terrain flat at the level that you first select. So everything will go to where you click, that height, to wherever you move it. So that's quite good. So if I wanted this to be like an outcrop level here, like a place where I could go stand, I could do this. And it's just a little like side bit on the mountain. Now the next tool that I'll go through is really useful for this. It's called a terrain ramp. This has less options than the others because it's a simpler tool. Basically, if I select here, it'll make a point, and I can select here, it'll ramp between those 2 points. This is excellent because it means that you can easily get a system where players can traverse. But now you might look at this and think, oh well, this is a bit dodgy, this edge here. You can't really see it, but there is. You can see it on the cursor. There's a bit of an edge that drops off very fast there. You can fix this with terrain smooth. You just go over it, and it smooths out any rough edges and makes it look more natural, as it were. So then that looks much better now. You can maybe use it a bit there to flatten it out, and it just generally like brings the gradients of things towards each other. So like if one gradient's very steep and the other's very shallow, it'll make like a middle point. The last tool that I haven't talked about is terrain noise, which doesn't do too much. It's like a very slow raise, but you can do all sorts of different things with it. it's something that you really have to play around with. So it's noise type raise only. You can have lower only, which does the same thing but lowers it, and it's basically for making very fine edges on your terrain and making it look exactly how you want. Then we've got terrain erosion, which I haven't really played around with much, but is basically the same sort of thing, but it carries a long way. Like, if you want an edge of a thing to look really eroded, like the edge of a mountain, it basically does that for you. It's very good for sand dunes and things like that. I think that's what it's mostly used for, because sand dunes do this. Terrain holes. Terrain holes are a very interesting feature which are used to make tunnels. I'm not going to go too much into this because it's quite complex, but lots of people have been doing it. There are lots of tutorials on YouTube on how to use a terrain hole. And basically you go like this. Obviously the the grass has stayed there, but you could delete that. And then you would have to make some sort of either a building or some rocks around here, and you could make an underground system under here. And say you wanted to exit out here, you could have an exit there, and you just have to build something between. That's how terrain hole works. So that's basically all the good stuff. The terrain editing is absolutely excellent. The objects, the ability to add objects is quite good because there's an awful lot of objects added in. Not every object from the single player is there, but there's enough to make a very wide variety of things. There's stuff from the temples, there's stuff from towns, there's World War II style things, there's airports, Chinese tomb, native villages, bigger villages and towns, temple as I said, then you can add bridges and all this other stuff. There's lots of items, which is good, because it means you can make varied maps very easily, if you want to. Along with that, adding areas of trees and things like that is very easy. It works in a very similar way to your object adding. Once again, you can just put them wherever you like, and there's quite a wide variety of things available. I'll show you here. There's not a huge amount, there's not as many as there is objects, but you don't really need that many things. So there's lots of different like shrubbery and all that sort of stuff. That's good. Once you've placed objects, let's place a bar, please. Maybe I have to be a bit closer. Oh, there it is. So I've got my bar, I can move it around, but once I have placed it, there's a good set of tools for editing it. So I've got X, Y, and Z coordinates, so I can move it around like that, and then I've got rotation of X, Y, and Z as well. So you get quite good control over where exactly your object is, so that's quite nice. And also, if you want to get rid of it, you can just go into this mode, click it, press delete, and it's gone. So object adding is quite good as well. Now we get onto things that aren't necessarily quite as good. Roads. Roads are good in that they do work, but they're also very annoying. So you get your road, you select a brush so you can draw it, you go like this. Now the problem with this, I hope, is being shown now. Basically a road creates nodes. So I've got a bunch of nodes. Now I can go on this and add nodes in and move them to shape my road. Thing with this is though, unless you want to add absolutely loads of nodes everywhere and to make something a certain shape, your roads can end up very jerky very easily unless you put a lot of time into it. So as this tool being what I take it to be, which is a very quick tool for beginners to use, the roads could do with working differently, just letting you draw it possibly. I would much prefer to have an option that didn't create nodes, that just allowed me to draw my road exactly where I want it to be. So that's a bit of a problem. I mean, it's good, but I don't like it specifically. Map limits are just the edges of your map. It's not really worth talking about. That's kind of obvious. Right, so on to the first real problem, the texture painter. Now the texture painter is good in that it has your tools that you use to paint your textures. The brush is very good as usual. Also, there is texture layering, which is also very good, and I think would be best for me to show you on another map actually, because texture layering is quite good. But the problem is that you're limited to 4 textures per map. This is a problem, and I'm just going to load up a map that I made earlier to show you why this is a problem. So I'm going to open up this one. This is a map that I started making earlier. Which corner is it in? It's here. Right, so on this map, if I go to texturing, I have 4 textures. I have Black Cliff, which is this texture here. I have Gravel 2, which I've used along the floor areas. Right. and then I have mossy tiles, which I've also used on the floor. Now I can show you the layer texturing here. Here we have mossy tiles and gravel, and you can see that the effect of layering two textures is very good, whereas actually if you just draw one texture, it has a tendency to not look that great. Like, it's a bit bland. I don't know, there's something about it that I just don't like. So if you layer textures, it gives it a bit of interesting quality, and not all of your areas is exactly the same then. The problem with this is being limited. Look, I can't add any more. So being limited to only 4 textures, that's it. If I want to make anything else on this map, I can't do it. If I want a sandy area, nope. If I want anything, basically, if I want a dirt track, nope. You can only have 4 textures. This sort of limiting is understandable on, say, a console, because a console probably can't deal with more than 4. But on the PC version, I really do expect to be allowed more than 4 textures. So that's something that really, really annoys me about this. Actually, probably one of the biggest problems, but not the biggest problems. This is water leveling. You can make water areas. It's quite cool. That's another good feature, really. But now this is by far the worst feature, and thankfully the feature that's being fixed. So on your map you have the ability through this options menu to add in vehicles. So if we go down, we can find, oh, they're static vehicles. Where's our normal vehicles? Gameplay. And they're listed under gameplay. Vehicles and weapons. Both vehicles and weapons. So I can add a 4x4 truck in. Woo! I can also add in AI. Oops. Stupid list. Right, so it's once again in gameplay. Say hostile mercenaries. I can get a pirate assaulter. There he is. Right? Now the thing is, I can make as many of these guys as I want. And I can go on here and enable AI generation, which means these guys will now have a place where they can walk, so they can walk in this area. Now first up, I cannot edit where they can walk at all. It is completely randomly done. These AI will wander around in this area. I can't say, I want you to patrol along this line. I can't do that. He's just going to wander wherever he wants. Which, if you're planning on making a co-op level for you and your friends, makes it completely impossible to do so, unless you box them in the areas that you want them to be in, or unless you're fine with them just wandering around aimlessly, in which case, okay, they'll do that. So that's a bit of a big problem for me. But then a worse problem is that if you place AI on a map, you can't use them online. They will just disappear. They are gone. Now I understand this in terms of the multiplayer. Ubisoft don't want people going online and putting AI on their maps and ruining the multiplayer experience for other people, because anybody can play your maps if you publish them. The thing is though, you can run private matches with your friends without having to publish your map. So why have they not included the ability to play a private co-op game mode with your friends? Currently there's no option. You can make a map for multiplayer and for multiplayer only. They put in AI, they put in character creation, they put in vehicles, and then they said, no wait, you can't use them. That's just like a single player feature, only for the map editor. You can't use it anywhere other than the map editor. That's rubbish. That is complete rubbish, and I don't understand why it's been done. So that is something that really needs fixing. Thankfully, because they're probably not going to fix it, a modder of Far Cry 3 is fixing this problem. He currently has vehicles working online. You can, with his patch currently, get a vehicle onto an online multiplayer match. But it has been said that if you publish this map, you could get banned and your map will be removed. So it's for private use only. But that should have been a feature in the game anyway. So I can understand why people aren't getting told off for just using it in private matches. And he's working on getting the AI in. He has done it, but it takes a lot of fiddling around, and he's trying to get it into an easy format for general users to be able to do. So I will link to that modification in the links. Of course, if you install this, it's at your own risk. make backups of everything that it replaces, because it does replace some game files. So back them up. I have mine backed up. I suggest that everybody else does. So it is something that's good to try out. If you want to make co-op matches for you and your friends, you're going to have to wait a bit until he releases the ability to add AI. And yeah, I've been Delta Dynamite. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.